It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
So let's talk a little bit about the components. What makes this possible? One of the reasons we're talking about this now, one of the reasons that this is a topic coming up in 2022 is that you need volatility present in order to harvest losses. You actually need the market to move in the negative direction. You need the value of your investments to go down to even make loss harvesting possible. A lot of our folks will ask us questions. They may have started working with us in a volatile year, a 2008 or a 2018, and we do some loss harvesting. Well, then we fast forward to the next. Is, hey guys, we're going to loss harvest this year, and we say, well, unfortunately, we're too good at what we do. We've made too much money this year. There are no losses to be had. So you have to have volatility. You have to actually have losses in your portfolio to be able to capitalize on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, our tax code, because this is all based upon what is tax policy, what are the rules that the IRS and Congress has set up. And we have a net policy, and the fact that you get to net your gains with your losses. And if you do have losses, because remember, we share this all the time, markets lose typically 2 out of 10 years. Now, fortunately, 8 out of 10 years we're rocking and rolling, making money. We get to cheer, celebrate, high five, and talk about how awesome things are. But in these down years, it is important to know we have this net process. And even if you have gains, maybe, and by the way, this is something that's very important. It's not all investments. You might have an installment process where you sold some land or where you sold a business, or or you have real estate gains from some other transaction where you sold rental property or something like that because real estate market values are up. You can net even investment losses against those gains, and that's an important thing. But here's what I like, as we already shared in the example or the definition, you get to net at least $3,000. Even if you don't have the gains, you can take $3,000 off your taxes. But the thing that I think is if you have more losses than gains, it also carries forward indefinitely. So even if this is something that doesn't benefit you beyond the $3,000, this could benefit you going forward. And it's not like you have to use it or lose it in the next 2, 3, 4 years. You actually indefinitely could carry these losses forward.
So another component that you need when it comes to doing loss harvesting is you need to make sure that you have a stable of investment options that are similar but not identical substitutes. Because remember, what we're doing is when an investment loses value, we're going to sell it at a loss, but we're not going to stay there. We're not just going to sell it and go to cash and wait for the market to recover. We're going to sell it. We're going to buy something else, and that something else has to be materially different than the thing that we sold. I can't just sell stock X today and go buy stock X again tomorrow. You're going to run afoul of some tax law. And the tax law that you're going to run afoul of is called a wash sale. And very simply, this is a sale. When a sale occurs, when an investor sells or trades a security at a loss and buys the same, or and this is important, a substantially identical security within 30 days before or after the sale. So what you can't do is I'm just going to lock in this loss and tomorrow I'm going to go buy the stock right back. They're going to say that is not materially different enough to justify the sale. You aren't going to be able to actually utilize those losses.
Yeah, and I want you to pay attention because this wash sale is an important component of this. You need to understand this rule to really do loss harvesting well, because otherwise you could run afoul and then get all kind of weird disclosures on your monthly statements because they won't let you take the losses, and you carry that forward as well. And a lot of people, and look, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you might be able to get away with it, but it's not the right way to do. And I always want you to be on the right side of the IRS because remember, they're the ones with the guns. They're the ones with the ability. They can just take your stuff if you do it wrong. So understand how wash sales rules work. That doesn't mean when we talk about substantially the same but not identical, it doesn't mean that you can sell Fidelity's S&P 500 and then go buy Vanguard's S&P 500, or sell the Schwab S&P 500 and then go buy the ETF of the S&P 500, because those are somewhat identical.
We'd argue those are identical holdings.
And I think you also have to be very careful. And there's been a lot of discussion on this, and you can probably get away with it, but it's not right. And I always want to try to give you the right guidance so you don't screw this up. I don't want you taking it in your taxable account and then going and putting it in your retirement account, the exact same holding. Yes, the IRS might not be able to track that individually, but if you ever got in an audit situation,
that would be against the rules.
If you were sitting across the table from that IRS agent, you would not want them asking those questions. So we're going to share with you the right ways to do this, because there is an opportunity here when we talk about something similar, because there's nothing that says that you doesn't, just because you sell doesn't mean you can't go into something similar, but it's not identical, and take advantage of this very powerful tool.
Yeah, so we're just going to give a very easy example of a holding that most people house. Let's say that you hold the Vanguard 500 index. It's a U.S. large cap index that holds the 500 largest companies in this country, and it's market capitalization weighted. We already said you'd probably run afoul of the wash sale rule if you sold the Vanguard 500 and bought the Fidelity 500 or the iShares 500 or something else that's measured the same way and holds the same securities. But what you could do is you could sell the S&P 500 and go buy a total market index or a total market ETF or maybe one of the zero funds, because they invest in a different bucket of securities than strictly the S&P 500. While there might be overlap, they are different enough that it would satisfy the wash sale rule. So one of the things you want to make sure you're doing is when you're analyzing what am I going to sell and what am I going to buy, do you actually know what's in those funds, what's in those ETFs, and could you justify to the IRS if they asked, hey, these are materially different enough that these are not substantially identical holdings?
I do want to make sure, because we're talking about the components of doing this loss harvesting. And we're going to talk about this as a risk or a bad, but I think it's worth making sure this concept comes up multiple times. When we do this strategy, you're trying to butt these transactions up as close to possible because you want to stay truly invested. I worry about the moral hazard or the behavioral hazard that somebody, because this is going to be scary, will sell and then go to cash and get into timing. This is not a timing strategy. This is a tool to help you take the volatility and actually harness the power of that for the benefit of your tax planning. It is not a strategy to get you in and back into the market from a timing perspective. You will run afoul of hurting yourself in the long term if you don't understand that concept. And Bo even has some better illustrations in a minute, but I want to make sure I put that component out there so you know we're doing this to stay invested.
That's right.
And use it as a tax strategy, not to time the market.